Let him walk over so he doesn't feel like he were.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'm ready when you are. Good evening. I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting for June 18th, 2024 to order. We will start with the land acknowledgement.
We acknowledge that the city of Kenmore is situated upon the ancestral lands of the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Soxuatl, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Tulalip, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and other tribes who are part of the Coast Salish peoples. We recognize and express our deepest respect for their enduring stewardship and profound relationship with this land, which they have cherished and protected since time immemorial. We honor the First Peoples, acknowledge their vibrant cultures, and commit ourselves to learning from their wisdom in our journey to promote justice, equity, and mutual understanding. We pledge to stand alongside these communities in acknowledging past injustices and working towards a future that respects and celebrates the diverse heritage of this land.
For the record, since the recording started late, this is the Planning Commission meeting for June 18th, 2024. All please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have anyone on the cloud for public comments?
There are no virtual or in-person public comments tonight.
So we will skip over public comments. I would like to add to the excusals for the consent agenda, Commissioner Quadri, who had a personal emergency due to a death in the family. I ask for, if without any further ado, all those in favor of approval of the consent agenda indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved by unanimous consent. Well, Mr. Hall, well, we have a staff memo and we have everything oh, we flip-flopped. Well, of course, there he is staring right at me. Hi, Richard.
Good evening.
Okay. I'd like to introduce Richard Sawyer, one of our directors, in fact, our environmental service director of the city. And he is going to introduce and walk us through the next draft of the natural environment element. So before you start, I'm going to look at our esteemed Ms. Bent and ask her, and I will repeat it for everyone. No, it's okay. Are we to finish this tonight, or are we making some more amendments and it'll come back one more time? Oh, you're gonna, well, I've made her walk now. She's gonna come up and address this issue. But I think it's important for us to understand what we're doing tonight.
Okay, so this evening is the first time you'll have seen a draft surface water element, and Richard is here to go through the draft and outline the rationale for the changes. So you're welcome to walk through that draft in any manner you wish, ask questions, provide comment. And yes, this will be coming back before you again. You will have to have a public hearing on this as well. The second item on the memo is the second time you've seen natural environment element, and that one we propose to just go through the comments and changes that were made since your last meeting. And again, once we have both those elements addressed sufficiently, we will then schedule a public hearing.
Thank you very much. I just like clarity for our commission. Sorry to make you walk so far.
So on that note, Richard is online, ready and waiting. He can pull up the draft element, so you'll be able to see it on your screens. And I'll turn it over to Richard. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Debbie.
Mr. Sawyer, you are going to start us off with the surface water element. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a any sort of fancy presentation or anything. I've learned from doing this previously with the commission that despite what I prepare, it really all comes down to just pulling it up and going line by line. So I'm just ready to provide a few opening remarks, and then we can jump right into it. The surface water element was last updated in 2014, so it's been a little while. And previously, it was pretty concise. Really, everything was just kind of grouped into under one goal. And so in this kind of first update, that was also the first kind of version of our surface water element in 2014. So in this update, there is some cleanup of outdated material. There's a little bit of new material, but really a lot of the red lines you see are just kind of reorganizing and cleaning up some of the language into some more concise goals. So we're proposing 5 goals instead of the 1, which would include adding a little bit more purposeful long-range guidance in the plan for things such as considering surface water management funding, which will be a new goal. Instead of just grouping, kind of one municipal storm sewer system, so kind of the constructed surface water environment and the natural environment, surface water environment, we kind of split those out. So being more precise with our policies for the constructed surface water environment under goal 2, and then focusing on the natural surface water environment as its own goal in goal 4. Adding a new goal to provide some long-range guidance on surface water capital improvement program. And then finally recognizing some of the regional efforts and partnerships important to the city's management of its surface waters as a new goal 5. So with that being said, I can start on page 1, and I'm happy to start
Respond to
page 1 and start working through it.
Okay, so feel free as we go through the pages, if you feel that there's something that we should pay particular attention to other than what you just spelled out about the goals, please feel free to just jump in. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Actually, one more thing to add as we're working our way through this, and also as you continue looking at the natural environment element, I've been working with Todd, and what we would like to do is, once we've received your first round of comments on the surface water element, coupled with comments provided on the natural environment element, as well as other comments we're receiving from the state, I think where we'd like to kind of pull some of that natural environment language that's really specific to surface water management. So things when it's getting on specific topics such as aquatic weed management, putting those things in the surface water element where they make a little bit more sense. So that's kind of another thing to keep in mind as we're working through this. These two elements, we're kind of planning to come back after we receive all those comments and maybe come back with something that is a little more clear and things are in the right spots.
If I may say a little, the next step down the road, of course, is to present this to the council. And I think you made some very good points, but if you might want to emphasize those points when we make the presentation to the council, so they understand what we've done and what your suggestion is, which a lot of us are nodding our head about. So I just sometimes, as you know, this is very complicated, and having some clarification helps them a lot. So we're going to start with surface water element. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start with all the way, starting with page, well, it's 8.1, so I'll just refer to it as 1, and we'll go through the complete of King County countywide planning policies, which ends on page 2. Is there any comments on that? Yes, Commissioner Olson.
This is actually going back before commenting on this.
You got to speak up into the mic, please.
I would like to see a note or some reference, just if we do take elements from the natural environment element and put it in the surface water element, just noting that surface water element related portions of the natural environment are C surface water element, or just something along those lines, if we do that. But that's it.
So what I think is that an agreement there? We're getting head nods. Richard, if you would be able to just make a list, that would be good. Okay, anything else on page 1 through half of page 2? Now we're going to start with the Clean Water Act, and we're going to go through and up to line 16 on page 3. I do acknowledge, Mr. Sawyer, all the work you've done on this. This is a lot of writing and thought that you've put into getting this together. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Anything else? Hearing none. So we're going to, boy, this is going to go fast. Saying that's like knocking on wood. So we're on page 3, background, and we're going to deal with that through page 5, where it says goals and objectives. Oh,
hello.
Go ahead, Commissioner Dorian.
I'm just wondering about the rationale for, I'm not arguing in favor or against at this point, but of deleting the references to the drainage basins and the tributaries here.
Okay, what line number?
We are page 8.3, it starts 25, line 25 on page 8.3. We lose the description of the drainage basins and the tributaries. And I'm just wondering if they are retained elsewhere. I think right at the end, there's a list of, or maybe I'm incorrect. I thought there was a list somewhere of all the
Yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I may not be, maybe I'm not showing all of the markup. Well, it says insertions, deletions. I do know the section you're talking about, and some of this cleanup, we have a surface water master plan, which really is one of the key implementation documents for a lot of this work. And in that plan, there are a lot more detail on basin planning and the watersheds throughout the city. So it's really just kind of reducing duplication and providing that information in a more appropriate plan. And that's typically what happens is these last couple cycles that gets updated shortly after this element gets updated. So that plan is being updated shortly after this one, and there's going to be a lot more focus on basin planning in that document.
That makes sense. Yeah, I get. We're all very keen on maps here, so the names of the tributaries stood out to me because I think we were talking about that last time. But it doesn't have to exist here if we know that that knowledge exists somewhere else, and we can link to it.
Okay. So a technical question. Who writes the surface water master plan and who approves it? I bet you I know who writes it.
Well, I'll be actually getting an RFQ put together to get consultant assistance with that plan. But yeah, and then I'll be the project manager for that update. And then we have traditionally taken that to city council for review, and I'm not sure if it's really a required formal approval, but we like to just get that and have council stamp of approval on that document.
Essentially, what you're saying, that document is the implementation of this element.
Correct. A good analogy would be like when we develop the climate action element, and then the climate action plan is really the primary implementation document.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but I would say with this element, probably equally as important as the surface water master plan would be the implementation of our stormwater management. SW, with so many acronyms. Boy, when I'm getting fumbled up, that's the stormwater management plan, which is required with our NPDES permit. That is probably equally as important, but between those two, the permit and the surface water master plan, that's really where you get a lot of your implementation.
Thank you. Any other comments or? Okay, seeing none. So we are now at line 18 on page 5. So we'll start with goal 1, fund surface water management.
Yeah, so this particular, since I've been here, we, there's a lot of thought. We do rate analyses and CIP analyses to implement charges and make sure that we're developing a sustainable financial plan. So just in reviewing kind of what we had in the other element, it seemed really lacking to me that we don't have some some long-term goals that just say, hey, we need to make sure that we're funding this work and thinking ahead.
Okay. Commissioner Dorian.
I think two things. One's probably easier than the other. The first one is I do like the addition of the goals and objectives and all of the additional policies that come with them. I think I could probably do with just one more overview of those changes, like what we're bringing in that's new, just as I run through this. The other thing that I'm looking at is just language consistency across elements for some of the parallelism. Like I think where we're stating things like the city shall implement, that seems a bit firmer than we have in a lot of our other elements. Or at least maybe it's the language that the city shall. I think we're normally used to seeing language in the policy like implement annual or consider implementing annual versus something that firm. And especially when it comes to budget, I don't know, maybe I'm off base there, but that language stood out to me as a bit firmer than I'm used to seeing in some of the elements. So I know there's two things there. Sorry, they were quite broad things as well. But the first one was if we could just get one more overview of the new goals and objectives, and just so we get a 50,000-foot overview of what we're doing by bringing those in. And then the other one is more broadly, just do we need to mitigate the language a bit to bring it in line with some of the other elements?
Okay. You got that? Mr. Sawyer? Okay.
Yes, I do, and I makes sense. Just typing those notes up now.
Commissioner Olson?
I was wondering, actually, I guess I kind of liked the firmer language in some ways, the
Yes.
shall. And I was wondering, I mean, I agree with Commissioner Dorian's points with keeping it consistent with other elements, but I'm wondering if this is potentially something that should be kept for some of these items to ensure that we actually do follow through on these policies, right? Like if we have a bunch of policies to maintain and improve surface water management and quality, I think it's important that, you know, we do hold ourselves to some account and say, yes, we need to do X, Y, Z to meet these policy objectives. And I think the reason why I kind of feel that way actually is the piece right above this, where it's talking about how we haven't necessarily seen significant improvement in surface water quality runoff since the city was incorporated. We saw improvements prior to that, right? But we haven't necessarily seen it in Kenmore, at least, since then. So I'm not necessarily against the more firm language, although I would take another look at it at least for maybe some of the items. Maybe it is overbearing on all of it. But I think as far as funding it and making sure we push this through, I'm not necessarily against it unless there's a legal reason we shouldn't be doing this that I'm unaware of.
Okay, so may I ask, with the commission's approval, I'd like to ask a couple questions from the left and the right. Okay, so your concern, did I hear it right, is that this is actually going to happen?
Not that it's actually going to happen, that it's actually going to be implemented, right? Like when we write a policy that requires, or maybe not, when we write a policy that updates the code that requires developers to take mitigation, then we're mitigating new damage, right? We're limiting new damage from occurring, but we're not fixing past issues or mistakes. And to me, the shall basically means we're going to get money booked for actually fixing some of the past mistakes with future capital improvement projects, like replacing culverts and the like. Although I believe that is separate funding actually, but regardless, similar idea.
Well, I'll guarantee you replacing culverts is nothing natural as far as the funding, but nonetheless, so I'm going to ask a technical question, which I should know clearly of Ms. Bent. So when this element, as with any elements, when they are adopted by the, I can repeat your answer too. When they are adopted by the council, are they adopted by ordinance or are they adopted as an element?
At the end of the year, council adopts whatever changes to the comprehensive plan by ordinance. So all elements that are being considered this year will be adopted by one ordinance.
By one ordinance. So in fact, the element as such becomes an ordinance of the city that has to be followed. The element, once the element is accepted or passed by the council, that is a policy which the council has agreed to follow. Is that a simple way to say it?
I guess, I think we're saying the same thing. So the ordinance the council adopts the comprehensive plan amendments. So then those amendments go into effect upon adoption of the ordinance.
Right, and so to respond, when the council adopts this element, they're saying they're going to, they want to, I'm using a loose term, live by the element. So when they look at adopting other budgetary issues or other things that affect surface water, they will look at the element, and that is what their guiding principle is. Not to say I would leave that to Debbie as far as if they were to adopt something completely different. You know, councils are councils, but I'll let Debbie respond if they were to adopt something completely different than what's mentioned in the element.
Mentioned in the element. Maybe I'm getting a bit confused here, but the element that council adopts by ordinance are one and the same.
Right. They have, so I guess to respond and make you feel a little more relaxed about your concern is that when they adopt this element, they mean it. It's an ordinance. And it's not something that they can just ignore. A council can do what they want, but they've ordained it. And it also is incumbent on the city administration to look at the element and follow it as far as policy guidelines. Now, that's a general statement, but I think that that's a fair, I mean, they're adopting the element as a comprehensive plan to look at all of the different pieces of the city and how the city is going to be implemented.
Well, it's the comprehensive plan is the guiding policy document, and then there are implementing regulations and other plans. So there are surface water regulations. There is a surface water capital facility element in the comprehensive plan, which outlines projects, infrastructure projects needed to meet growth. There is the surface water plan, which Richard mentioned, which is an implementation piece of the comprehensive plan. So again, like other elements, like the land use element, the zoning regulations are the implementation measures for that element. So it's kind of, you go from the grand scale, if you like, to the finer scale for implementation. So council uses this as a guidance document, and then there are implementing documents as well that help kind of, guide how surface water will be implemented, whether it's by projects or by regulations, or by, the surface water study or the surface water rates, which are again, implementation measures. And I don't know if Richard's got anything to add.
Well, in the context of this particular goal, I would just say that, the councils, both current and previous, have, as far as funding surface water management, this is consistent with the policies that they've set currently in place and they have followed up to now. And what I want to establish is just, identifying this and being purposeful in our long-range plan that, this is ongoing when there are new councils down the road and new directors, just having this very firmly in place that, this is our ongoing long-term vision to continue funding surface water management.
So another way to look at it, Commissioner Dorian and Commissioner Olson, is that there's a whole reason why a planning commission exists, and it's in state law to do this. Because we are responsible to draft it, have a public hearing, and then pass it on. It's that important. And the city really, like everybody's saying, has to follow it. And so this is why it's so important that we try to get it right. Maybe we don't all the time, but we try, don't we?
I agree with that. And I suppose that my question would be, it sounds to me like there wouldn't be any functional difference between saying shall and may, especially since some of this has already been implemented. I was simply looking at it from the perspective of, to your point about councils, and to Richard's point about setting the tone for future coverage of this, just ensuring that this isn't something that gets taken out by a council that's not interested in managing this or raising those funds. And I mean, I see what you're getting at, and I feel like I'm coming off as, it almost feels conspiratorial, and that's not how I mean it. My thought process almost feels conspiratorial, not this, to be clear. I'm not, I don't actually think that would happen, and I hope that wouldn't happen. But to me, I think that's the reason why I read the shall, and I'm kind of like, it makes sense, especially for things like managed debt, right? Like that's something that should be a shall. It shouldn't be a, they may manage their debt, but they don't have to, right? Like, I guess that's how I was reading it. And so to me, this still provides latitude even with the shall, because, you know, they could choose to decrease the tax to a very, very low rate that's effectively negligible if they so choose, right? So the shall is just saying, hey, like, this is the intent, we really strongly believe this. And I would be open to other language on this, but I guess I didn't flag it because I kind of liked it, and I just wanted to make that known.
If you like it, then we can keep it. Okay, Commissioner Dorian, you've been waiting.
That's fine. I think maybe mine is a question for our development services team. It's consistency across elements is all that I'm questioning. I'm not questioning the goal. I think the goal is a good goal. I'm just wondering if it's consistent with other elements. And I'm going to play the newbie card. I've not been here long enough to know firsthand. Like, for example, in the climate change element, do we have a goal that we're going to fund a climate action plan? Or did that exist somewhere else? That's kind of the question that I've got. I don't disagree with the goal. I'm just wondering whether it's consistent across elements.
Off the top of my head, I don't know where, you know, shall fund, may fund, should fund might fall in other elements, but it's certainly something that we can follow up on. I'll work with Todd and Debbie and make sure that we're being consistent.
I think you'll find shall in some elements, but not in all. So again, I don't think there's any right or wrong way of doing it. Shall is obviously gives more strength, but it's not something that's used universally throughout.
Commissioner Vanderleen.
Thank you, Debbie. I think that's very useful information to have. There is nothing to my knowledge that says that you cannot use shall or may. Those are both tools that we have available to us. In the context of what we have here, I like the stronger shall, because I think we're particularly in policy 1, 2.1 and 2, we're talking about financial issues here for which we don't want to be vague. I think the other component here is the city council gets to read and approve any of this. So what we're doing is giving our best information, our best judgment to the city on the way we go. My other piece of parsing this, and when I read this, was that yes, what this is saying, the city shall implement rates and charges, but then it leaves to implementation how those rates are going to be established, what policy would be behind that. So I'm fine with that. But while I've got everybody's attention, I will add my one question here. Richard, in policy 1.1.1, it says the city shall implement annual rates and charges for all developed parcels. Why do we specifically call out only developed parcels? As I think surface water management is something that has citywide implications to it. So I would think that if we have, and even though we don't have very much in terms of undeveloped or undevelopable property out there, I think they ought to be contributing to the overall benefit as well.
Yeah, so great question. And that is a defined specific term in some of our other surface water management documents. I mean, just kind of briefly, the policy identifies that developed parcels really contribute to runoff and water quality issues, and therefore undeveloped and open space properties, which are also defined. And actually, I believe open space and perhaps undeveloped are state defined terms in some of our other documents. But they, we want to, recognize that they have less impact, but also potentially promote and encourage the use of those spaces, so that, if someone wants to conserve and restore property and meet that definition of open space or undeveloped, they're not going to, have to pay these other charges on that property. But developed includes, so, you could have, doesn't necessarily just mean structures and impervious layers. You could remove native plants and soils and plant a lawn, and you're now considered developed and you're going to be assessed. So this is truly those, completely undeveloped properties.
Thank you, Richard. I get the distinction. I still struggle with the fact that many of our surface water management projects are intended to benefit the city as a whole, and the surface water management throughout the entire city. So I would think that benefits, however we define developed versus undeveloped, it benefits both types of properties. And to the extent that these activities are happening and being financed by one group of landowners, and then later down the line, those undeveloped parcels become developed, they've gained the financial gain out of what's been contributed in the past by those who paid the tax and paid the rates. So I can let this go, and maybe that we pick this up in the implementation of the capital facility charges when it's eventually developed. But still, I think there's a lack of equity here when defining the two different properties and what's going to be subject to. Going to be subject to the fees that are going to be intended to benefit and maintain our surface water throughout the city.
Commissioner Olson.
I was gonna have a longer statement, but Commissioner Vanderland kind of hinted at my point there, which to me, I think some of that would be covered by the capital facility improvement fees, right, for future development on an undeveloped lot. That being said, I hadn't considered this, but I also kind of see an equity issue in the sense of you're holding a land that you're not paying into surface water treatment today, but you benefit from that potentially in the future in terms of reduced flooding, et cetera, that may or may not impact your property. And so while I wouldn't necessarily expect them to need to pay as much because they aren't actively contributing, like the property isn't actively contributing to the issue today, it's almost like it's a deferred tax that everyone else is paying into that owner would then benefit from potentially in appreciated values in the future, especially considering undeveloped lots are very valuable in a developed area like Kenmore, where there aren't very many undeveloped lots. I don't know. I've got mixed feelings on it.
Commissioner.
Well, if I could, I might be able to clarify a little bit. So most of these lots are not developable. And so examples would include like when the city purchases properties on Swamp Creek and demolishes those existing structures and returns the floodplain, that's a parcel that doesn't get assessed a swim fee. So the city could charge itself a swim fee, but that property is never going to develop, past that point. And probably I would say that many of these properties are city-owned properties of that nature. And then I would probably group the next largest one when development happens. Oftentimes they're required to make NGPA tracts, which so you'll get like a residential development, and then you might have a tract that's just, the entire tract is a protected wetland and it can't be developed. So that would be another example of this type of property. And there's a lot of, it gets complicated because, especially with those tracts, which probably include many of these properties, aren't really, they have undivided interest with plats and HOAs, and we would have to, King County can't collect those fees for us, which is who collects our fees. So we would have to establish a new program to somehow go out and figure out how we're going to track down owners of these properties if we wanted to go that route. So it's very technically a difficult process that would probably cost more than what the revenue we would get from them, if that makes sense.
Is there any further comment? Commissioner Banazinski.
Yep. Richard, I was going to ask what if you could tell us about specific examples of undeveloped properties, like what kinds of properties fall into this category, which I think you already did, which is good. And so just for clarity, for myself, and perhaps for those listening, when I think about the undeveloped properties in Kenmore, I think about them in kind of two categories. I think about ones that are totally encumbered by critical areas that people might be holding for whatever reason. I'm thinking of the property on 61st that the city just purchased as an undeveloped property, like that being one category. And then I can think of others like the Holt property next to the storage behind us, which is not encumbered by critical areas, but it's just sitting empty and likely will. So I guess, and I don't think that there are very many of those. I think there probably are more that are encumbered by critical areas. Would you say that that is fair accounting?
Correct, yeah. And those are pretty few and far between. And I think Commissioner Olson was mentioning earlier, or perhaps it was a different commissioner, if for some reason they can develop, once they develop, not only does that annual rate kick in, but the capital facility charge, they have to pay an upfront lump sum to kind of buy into that system. So when you were talking about that equity component, we do capture that there. So even a single family home would have to pay a capital facilities charge to basically kind of buy their way into that existing system that's already there that they benefit from.
Yeah, so that makes it difficult for me to see how our undeveloped properties that are encumbered by critical areas, they're not significantly contributing to stormwater runoff problems, which is a large part of what we're trying to solve with these stormwater management rates. And not having to pay a swim rate could be seen as an incentive to leave them as they are currently functioning. And so for that reason, I would advocate for leaving the policy as is, to charge these fees to developed parcels, especially given that it seems like we do have a protocol for collecting the money that we need when properties become developed. Those that can be, when they become developed, we have a mechanism for collecting the money we need to bring them online. Is that right? I just want to make sure I didn't say anything that wasn't true there. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Vanderleen.
Thank you, Richard. You answered my question, satisfied my concern. The fact that these expenses would be picked up, or obligations we picked up through the capital facility charge or earlier through the annual rate setting, I think covers the issue that I was concerned with. So thank you.
Any further comments? I just have one, and that's a gold star for Mr. Sawyer. 1.1.4. Well, if we could have that in all of our elements, that would make a lot of this, it's something that we could point to about those who are concerned about all of the required income that the city needs in order to provide the services which are necessary to preserve our city. And I just wanted to say thank you for putting that in. So with that said, let's go to goal 2, which starts on page 6, line 4, and continues to page 8, line 21.
And happy to take questions. And just to reiterate what I mentioned earlier, I basically took kind of that one general goal that included both our constructed and natural environment and broke it into these two. So this represents that constructed surface water environment.
Excuse me. Any further comments on goal number 2? Commissioner Banaziski.
This pulls forward the conversation that we were just having about the firmness of language that we use. I'm looking at objective 2.2 on page 8-7, line 1. The first line is utilize best available science to manage development, redevelopment, construction, and city projects to mitigate flooding and reduce the discharge of pollutants to the maximum extent practicable. And I wondered about that phrase, or the word practicable. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, Richard, to you as a practitioner who's having to develop code and such to manage that, the discharge of pollutants?
For the record, what would you state the line number that you're talking about?
Yeah, it starts on line 1. It goes from line 1 to 4.
Thank you.
Practicable is on line 4.
Certainly. So this is a term you'll see in our design manuals and in our permit language, which it probably has a an official state definition, and so I don't want to get myself in trouble. But for myself, it really means to utilize the tools that you have available at a particular site or situation to the maximum extent that you can achieve these goals. And sometimes every project site may have different parameters and issues that can be addressed through a variety of different ways. Some are going to work better than others, and it's just really you're going to pick and use the best tools in your toolbox for those to address and deal with those issues.
Oops, sorry. So you read that as kind of setting a high bar for us and not as a way for us to kind of throw up our hands at some point and say, oh, well, it wasn't practicable. We can't do that.
Yes. And again, I'm not cheating and looking up the definition, but there could be, some limitations that, make one, use of certain tools at one spot, not, the best tools at other spots. And so really it's, just doing, using the best tools that you have available and to address the problems at those. When we're a recent site that comes to mind, flow control, managing flow control from development is one of those core requirements, and eliminating any, reducing pollutants and your runoff and enhancing water quality is another, factor that you're balancing. And then wetland health and habitat are important. And so you may have a project where you're kind of balancing those things. We recently had one where, we're in a basin and flow control is very important, but we found that, while trying to meet the maximum flow control requirements there, it would actually impact and harm the adjacent wetlands that had developed over time, because it would kind of alter the hydro periods and the wet seasons of how that wetland function, and actually negatively impact that wetland. So, just following the standards and protocols and doing the maximum flow control, which typically is good, was actually harming others. So it's just looking at those and picking the right best management practices and finding those balances. So while and this was in Swamp Creek, so we definitely want to manage flows, but we also don't want to destroy wetlands that have, grown in some of these areas and are very delicate. So, that might be one example where you're finding that balance and just doing what's, the most practical option moving forward, that's using the best science that you have available at the time. Hopefully, does that help clarify?
That does. And what I like about your example is it talks about kind of the competing variables that you're considering that do not have to do with necessarily development, but have to do with watershed health. Usually when I read these things in our comprehensive plan, I think that we're trying to kind of just maximize the extent to which we can develop, but it sounds like this is trying to get at kind of balancing the health of our natural systems, water surface systems. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if there's some way to add a clause that makes that more clear on first read. I don't have a suggestion right now, but I can come up with one if that would be helpful.
Yeah, if you'd like to propose something, we can also, I'm making a note and we can take a closer look at it.
So when you say propose something, so that allows any commissioner to propose something. I just want to remember how we send that in. Okay. We have email rules if you choose to do that. Okay. Otherwise, there's a commission clerk that's going to beat me over the head afterwards. So I just wanted you to know. Okay, I saw someone's hand go up before there he is, Commissioner Olson.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually, on my first read through, had a concern about practicable. And I think the thing that put my mind at ease was the maximum extent. Right, it's not just saying something has to be done, and I would argue it'd be very difficult for a situation to be like, oh, well, we had to put in these parking spaces and widen the roadway to not do any surface water improvements. That would not be acceptable, in my view. And the other reason, the other types of constraints I see is like tree canopy and coverage. Sometimes you have situations where you would have to remove a tree to put in the maximal amount of water treatment, for instance. Things like that. And so that's, I wouldn't mind seeing a clause there, though, to try and prevent any interpretation of going, oh, well, this is like a loophole because I see your concern there, and I don't want that, and I don't think that should be, I don't think that's the intent, but a clause may be useful there.
Mr. Sawyer, have you some suggestions on that? You can always choose to say, let me get back to you on that.
Yes, we'll have to get back to you, and then I would encourage, whatever the appropriate mechanism for providing us comments are, please do so, and we're happy to take that feedback as well.
Thank you. Is that all right with you, Commissioner Olson?
Oh, absolutely. I didn't have language.
Oh, you have one more?
No, I was just saying it's absolutely good with me. I didn't have language for this.
Okay. All right, then, if there's no further comment on goal 2, then we're headed to goal 3, starting on page 8, line 22, and going through line 22 on page 9. And now I may have missed it. Is MS4 defined by parentheses somewhere? Did I miss it?
It's up above.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Chair Thompson, can you clarify again, or we're on goal 3 right now?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Not only are we on goal 3, but I don't see any comments on goal 3. Oh, Commissioner Banczewski.
I am looking at objective 3.2, which is on page 8-9. I guess that's page 9. And that it's line 1. The objective is remove fish passage barriers on city streams, which I endorse. And the policy is about evaluating and prioritizing culverts throughout the city and implementing a replacement program, which I also endorse. I'm guessing that a lot of the projects that happen will be on city-owned property, like city-owned culverts. Is that right? Or
I believe on our kind of top 10 list right now that we're working from, one is actually kind of goes from public to private, and then another is private. So that was kind of an intentional decision that, again, kind of takes us back to, we need to do what's higher priority. Sometimes that's a little bit harder, but, if it makes more sense to work your way from those, receiving water bodies where we're having migratory fish start from, we need to start at the bottom and work our way up. And it doesn't always follow the right of way.
okay, so it is inclusive of culverts that are publicly and privately owned. This.
Correct. Yeah. So
okay, that's
the
great.
term city streams, I guess I'm just saying streams within the city. I didn't mean to imply, just city property.
Yeah, no, you didn't necessarily. I just wondered if it made sense to have policies that differentiated between publicly owned and privately owned culverts, because I know that it can be a level of effort harder to deal with ones that are privately owned. But it sounds like you've already incorporated them into your thinking about the whole watershed. So it doesn't sound like we need separate policies for those two different categories. That's great. Thank you so much.
Any further comments? All right, then we're off to goal 4, beginning on line 23, page 9, to the end of the element. And that's on page 10. Is there any comments on goal 4? Hearing none, are we? Oh, we have, I'm sorry, I missed this. Okay. Right, okay, so we are on, just a second, I just want to make sure I didn't. We go from page 10 to page 11. We have a strikeout section from 1. And then we start with line 14 through line 34, which is number 5, objective 5. And this is a new objective, correct, Mr. Sawyer?
Goal 5?
Yes.
Yes. Well, as I think some of these elements were touched on, kind of grouped in before, and they've been kind of pulled into a separate goal and expanded on.
So the reorganized elements. So I see Commissioner Dorian.
Thank you. 2 things again. Point of information, first of all, if anybody's following along, the Planning Commission has a document that has the strikeouts. So our pages and line references are different than the one that is being presented. Just in case anybody's trying to follow along, that's why you're hearing different numbers. The content is the same, we just have the strikeouts. And then the other point I was going to make is that goal 5, we have goals and objectives, but no policies. And I was just going to ask about that.
That's a good. So,
I had the same question for Todd. I mentioned to him that, these were really kind of standalone bullets and our standalone objectives. Okay. And I'll let Todd address that, but I believe it was okay.
I'm going to save everyone, and it sounds like you might want to come back to us at a future meeting with a goal 5. Well, boy, I just got a thumbs up on that. Oh, look at that. Commissioner Vanderleen may have an answer for us.
Yes, if you look at line 11, I think we just have an editing issue here.
Oh, there it
The end
is.
there, it begins with goal 5. It states goal 5.
Amazing. There is goal 5. So we're going to start on line 11, goal 5. That makes sense. All right. So we're still on goal 5 and those objectives. Commissioner Banazinski.
I just want to make sure that Commissioner Dorian's point still gets addressed, because there is that alignment issue there, but it still is the case that none of the objectives have associated policies. And that was what the point you were raising, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any requirement for there to be policies. So I think when Richard asked the question, there is no requirement. Other elements do have policies. But maybe there's a way we can kind of rework some of these to be more policy driven than objectives. So I think if the text is right there, we could maybe work some of these into more of a policy context.
So what the staff is suggesting is that we refer this back to staff for a rewrite to come back with us on the second draft. I see a lot of staff heads going up and down on that. I think we can agree to that. All right, so that is that. Wonderful.
Could I, just for a point of clarification, I think we can rearrange this to maybe look more how the commission would like it. But as far as the content goes, if there's any comments, if there's anything lacking, we could take that feedback now as well as we redo the formatting for you.
Are there any comments on what is written there from goal 5 through objective 5.4? Commissioner Banczynski.
Many of us do a lot of thinking about Chinook salmon because they are federally listed as threatened, and we do, Kenmore as a jurisdiction in RIE does participate in the RIE Salmon Recovery Council. And I think that's great. I support that. Richard, do you ever think about some of the other priority species that WDFW talks about and that are more of a priority for other government agencies? I know that, for example, bull trout is a focus of one of them. I'm blanking right now on which one that is. Yeah, I'm wondering how that, do you think about that when you're thinking about projects to do in the city and who might be interested in helping support them with funding?
At this level, I don't believe there is, that guidance at kind of more project specific level. It definitely comes into play when we're going through, a particular stream and trying to meet certain objectives for, that project. But it is, to your point, I think it's lacking at this level.
Yeah, it's an open question that I have at this point. I don't know that I have a strong feeling, but I wonder if it might make some things easier for us if we started to incorporate a focus on other species of priority for other agencies into our thinking, as much as we do Chinook salmon, which I default to that myself. I don't know. You would be the best indicator of whether that would be helpful for the city or not.
Yeah, I'm making a note off screen here to, and we'll look into that.
Any other comments? Commissioner Dorian?
I think objective 5.2 is well made, given points made earlier in the element as well about Kenmore oftentimes being impacted by other local jurisdictions and the surface water runoff that they have because they're uphill. So I think that it's a good objective. That's one I particularly think where we might want to see some policies around that, given that's going to involve some coordination and working with other municipalities.
And Commissioner Olson?
I just want to echo Commissioner Dorian. I think that's a really good point. Swamp Creek, I believe, gets, what is it? Mill Creek, Linwood, Mount Lake Terrace, Everett, like all of it. And if they are doing very little or worst case, effectively nothing. Those pollutants end up in our watershed and then end up in Lake Washington eventually. So yeah, I'd love to see some additional policies around that. And I'm not sure what we can do to get other cities to address the pollutants in their runoff effectively, but whatever we can do, I would be interested in pursuing.
Any further comments on goal 5? Okay, hearing none, then we're going to go forward. You want us to go ahead and do the implementation tonight, Ms. Bent?
Yes, if you have any comments, that would be fine.
So let's, the first page is number 12. Is there any? That's a pretty simple one. I would think there's not much. And then I noticed that a lot of page 8, 13 and 14 is struck out. So we need to start with the top of page 13. There's 4 lines there. And the rest of the page is a strikeout. And then on the top of page 14, there's some new language. And then the rest of the page is strikeout. So do we have any comments on those new, the new language or the strikeouts? Commissioner Banazinski.
I have a question of clarification on the implementation portion. So just as an example, like this is page 12, line 11, which is different from what everyone else's. No, it's the same on the screen there. Okay, so it says King County Surface Water Design Manual, and then the next line, it says updated 2021. When that happens, that updated 2021, that's referring to the line above. Is that correct? I can't click on them, so they don't take me. Oh, they're not links. Yeah.
Correct. They're not. Yeah, they are not
Okay.
links. And I think that the formatting, and I apologize, something happened because it should be bulleted and indented. It would be much.
Okay. Yeah.
It should have kind of the implementation document, and then if there's additional information underneath it, there would be a couple bullets, and I'm not sure why those didn't come through. So
Okay. No, that
I'll
makes
make sure that's cleaned up.
that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Any other comments through page 14? Commissioner Dorian.
Just a thought, so devil's advocate. So I did look across some of the other elements, and there are some other, like going back to the goal 1 now, there are some other objectives and pieces of language around budgeting and working with budget, but not as strong. But then coming back to implementation here, the challenge I see with having strong language around funding in a goal is, if you look at the transportation element, what that then means in implementation is there's actual budget in there. Like there's firm description of budget line items and planning for revenues and costs. So I think for consistency, again, that's just one thing we would want to balance. If we're going to have very firm language up front about how we're going to fund it, then I think implementation might need some elements of that to be consistent with other elements like the transportation element.
Okay, you got some feedback there.
So
Hmm.
just specifically, so in regards to implementing the funding portion of goal 1, you're saying you're not seeing something in implementation that supports that, as you see in other elements.
I think that's the point, yeah, is that if we are firm upfront in the goals that we are going to fund this and this is to an extent, this is how we're going to fund it with rates and charges, then in implementation, we might need to see something closer as like an overview of costs and revenues around that. So like the trade-off of the two. If we have firmness in the goal and objective, but we don't have the clarity in the implementation, there could be a disconnect there.
Okay.
Commissioner Vanderling.
Great point. What I would suggest is in the list we have that starts the implementation section, that lists of documents and sources you go back to, we include the budget, and which is already cited in section 1 above. One of the documents you would look to as your implementation would be the budget, which is a requirement in the policy and procedures above.
Correct, yeah.
So just add to that list.
I'm not sure if I may, go ahead, Commissioner Olson.
Oh, apologies. I was wondering about the capital improvements section, kind of related to this whole discussion around implementation and use of funds.
What page are you
Oh,
on?
I apologize. That is page, oh gosh, it doesn't have a page number. It is the last page. It is 818. I'm just putting a page number there. It looks like it's just
It's a table, right?
Yeah, and so I would assume that those would be some of the expenditures for surface water capital improvements, but not necessarily an exhaustive list. Like there, I could see other projects or tasks outside of this that would still meet the goals and objectives stated previously, right? Goals 1 through 5. So for as far as like implementation goes, if there's any reference to this with those funds, that would be useful. I also would like to see perhaps notes about what other types of work or projects that it may include, that isn't necessarily as precise as a capital improvement, kind of like, once again, for transportation section or other elements. Yeah.
So are you talking specifically kind of seeing the CIP project list?
Yeah, it looked like that was said fiscally unconstrained. So I was assuming we don't necessarily have money set aside for that, or that implementation of funds would guarantee the ability to pay for all of these. Some of this is probably relying on grants and the like. But directing, perhaps having language in the implementation section, directing some of the funds gathered by the city towards this capital improvements list, and then also defining what other things it might be directed towards that aren't necessarily part of this, right? Like whatever it would be used for, just to make it explicit.
Okay.
What funds could be used for, I guess.
So if I may, Richard, our goal here is not to do budgeting. And budgeting is left to the city council to implement the plan. And I know that Richard's going to address what table CFB is intended for, but in any case, it's not our purview, as I understand it, to make a list of priorities for budgeting. Now, I see our fearless leader over there she wants to say something regarding this.
So this is a table that's in the comprehensive plan capital facilities element, which is similar that what you approve for the transportation list of projects. So this is an unconstrained list of projects over the 20-year period. So you have to have a list of projects in the comprehensive plan, capital facilities element. And then the council then adopts a 6-year capital improvement program. And for projects to be on the 6-year CIP, they need to have a budget that goes along with them. And they also then need to appear in the comprehensive plan. So that's what this table is for. So the Planning Commission will give a recommendation because this is part of the capital facilities element. And that will be adopted as part of this year's comp plan update.
Yeah. In a separate element.
It's part of the capital facilities element.
Right.
Yes, correct.
I know it's a convoluted kind of thing that we do. All right, so we're back to, I mean, it's a good point, and I think that when we do a public hearing, it'd be probably an important point, Richard, that what Debbie just said is reiterated by you when you do the staff, the short staff introduction at the public hearing, so that people they understand what an unconstrained list is. Because it's easily misunderstood. I mean, if we are not exactly clear, just imagine what how the public sees this. So I see a hand down at the other end, Commissioner Dorian.
So I guess this does come full circle. It takes me all the way back to goal 1. And it's a question because I don't know how the funding for surface water management works. But when I'm reading goal 1, it seems like we're suggesting that it's mostly the funding is going to come from rates and charges, which I'm not sure if that's accurate or if I'm just reading it in that way, versus the transportation element, for example, talks about seeking to secure adequate funding sources through a variety of methods. These methods may include seeking federal and state funds, encouraging public-private partnerships, et cetera, et cetera. Are those types of routes for funding available for surface water management as well, or is it all through rates and charges that we have to develop the budget?
The bulk of the budget is secured through those service charge rates and capital facility charge revenues, but we also do pursue grants, and I can certainly add that. I'm already adding that to the other goal 1 comment. I think that's a good point to show that we do have, more diverse source avenues for revenue than just those rates. And I'm happy to add those. Would that be, can I go ahead and take that as direction to include that?
We have head nods here, yes. So I have a hypothetical. So if a city wanted to work on some major culverts to improve passage of our fish, it is possible that they could increase the swim rates to help with that problem. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And
it's a hypothetical now, Mr. Sawyer.
Okay.
So I was just pointing that out. And any other, so do we have any other comments on the actual words that are going to be left in the implementation section, just to make sure that everyone's read the words that are not struck out? Now, there's some at the top of page 13 and 14. Not very much, but there's a little bit. And there's also some at the top of page 17. Just for clarification, you do not expect to add any more projects, quote unquote, to the unconstrained list?
I believe we've updated that list to the best of our current knowledge.
Okay,
Correct.
I just, in case there were, we didn't want any surprises. All right, any other comments on the this element? And Mr. Sawyer, do you have any more questions for us?
I do not. Yeah, I appreciate your feedback, and I will work with Debbie, Todd, and hopefully address these comments to your satisfaction. And I believe, don't have the date in front of me when we're coming back, but I believe I will be seeing you again in July.
Oh, we're gonna look forward to it. Just great, and thank you on behalf of the commission. Thank you very much for all your hard work on this, because we do understand how difficult it is to put this together with all the changes and everything that you've done in here to bring it up to date. And you've made our job tremendously easier to do, and thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. So does anyone want a moment to break for anything? You do? Okay. Okay, it's been requested that we have a 4 or 5 minute break to take care of things, and we will be in recess. Gentlemen, we're back in session again on the Planning Commission meeting for tonight. And before us now, we have our esteemed Mr. Hall and Ms. Bent to bring us to what we need to do and where we're at on the natural environment.
Yeah, excellent.
Program.
So, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Good evening again. As you are well aware, we had a very robust discussion at our May 7th meeting. I know it's been a little while, so we'll just to kind of refresh our memories back a little bit. We've had some middle housing in there and sandwiched in the middle, but we talked a lot about the natural environment element and a lot of the sections that sounded pretty good, but we needed to just kind of refine a lot of those sections. And then what I've done is similar to a couple of the other elements that I've done in the past. I created a matrix of all the comments, and hopefully this is addressed to your satisfaction, you know, specifically with regards to each of the sections that we reviewed. And I put pages and line items to really, you know, target those specific questions and lines that you had questions on. So I'd like to, since we did go over this in pretty heavy detail last time, I just wanted to start off with, if you have any questions or concerns with regards to the matrix and the responses that I gave. And then from there, if you have any additional comments or concerns of the element itself that you would like to have addressed before we, you know, have you consider on moving to the next stage, which would be to hold a public hearing and then so on and so forth, recommendations. So I'll leave it to the commission at this point on how you'd like to proceed.
Well, just to clarify, we would probably, once this is done tonight, would like to see a final copy, and then we'll pass that for a public hearing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be fine. So let's start, folks, with page 1. And we're gonna go through up into existing conditions on page 3. So does anyone have any concerns or wants to speak to a amendment or specific question on those items? No?
Share the, are we going through, I guess for a point of clarification, did you want to go through the element again or just with the?
We're going to
up on
go
the
through the
screen?
element again to make sure people have an opportunity.
Okay.
Because after this time, we're not going to go through the element again, piece by piece, because what we normally do is we bring your draft back, and then I look to the left and look to the right and find out if anybody has
Perfect.
an
Okay.
issue.
Yeah.
That's then we move along. So, so I don't hear any comments up and through existing conditions on page 3, line 13. Okay, so now we're going to go page 3, existing conditions, line 13, and let's go through the end of page 5. Easy. Oh, Commissioner Olson.
Relatively minor item on 4D5 line 17. Wood burning as a primary heating source also contributes to air quality. I think just maybe not particulates, but some other synonym for what we're implying. It's pretty clear to me that that doesn't improve air quality, but that's kind of what my mind went to when I read that. So minor change. That's it.
It's the wording, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
what line number are you talking about?
Line 17 on page 5,
Okay.
just changing air quality to particulate matter or something along those lines.
So what do you suggest?
Well,
Commissioner
I was going to
Wilson?
leave it up to them because I'm not coming up with good synonyms for particulates at the moment, and we say it a line before. Wood burning as a primary heating source also contributes to air pollution, perhaps.
So are you saying that you would like to send an email with suggestions, or you not want to leave it to our staff to?
I think it's a minor enough change that I'd be fine leaving that to the staff. I think the
Okay.
intent was there. It's
Are
just,
you okay with that? Okay, so we're okay with that. I'll make a circle and that will come, that will be one of the few notes that come back to us the next time. All right, anything else through page 5? Hearing, seeing none, we're gonna flip the page and so we got blank pages here. Page 7, water and wetlands. And we could kind of move. We can just take all of that through line 17 on page 12.
And just a brief note too, that you'll see placeholders. I might have mentioned this on the last meeting, but placeholders for figures or the maps. The reason why they're not in here is because our GIS analyst, Amanda Larson, she's been on maternity leave since February. She's coming back at the beginning of July. And that's one of my first to do things with her is to get maps start developed for the comp plan. So you'll see these implemented if it's not right in time for your review, but I think the best course is be able to see in the last iterations of the comp plan, and you'll get an idea what they are. It's really just making them consistent with our current mapping standards and whatnot. You've seen those in what she did for I think it was the utilities and public facilities elements. And so that's really what that is. So you're not really missing anything big. It's just that we're kind of streamlining these maps. Yep.
Okay, so any other? Okay, Commissioner Vanazinski.
I have a request for just a small addition on page 4D10, line 14. The whole sentence is to improve habitat areas, invasive species removal and restoration of native habitats have been accomplished at Wallace Swamp Creek Park, et cetera. I was wondering if we could add after accomplished and are ongoing, just to give people the understanding that these efforts do have to be ongoing. We have accomplished some very wonderful things and we have more to do. Thank you.
So you gave him some words. Is
Yes, my words were and are ongoing after accomplished.
there any objections? So we'll add that. Any other items through page, I believe I said page 12, line 16? No further comments, so we're going to move on to from endangered, threatened, sensitive, and priority species, which is line 17 on page 12. And we're going to go all the way to page 15, line 10.
And just another brief comment, you'll notice some added language or just a few notes from Fish and Wildlife that's highlighted in green. I needed to pick another color. So as you know, we submit these out to different agencies as we go through these elements, and these are some of the feedback that they gave us just to add into the narrative.
I have something for you, Commissioner Beninsinski. Have you seen a little brown bat?
I have not, but I was actually just sharing with Commissioner Olson how dear I found that we included them. So I appreciate that.
The only reason I ask her is because I think of all of us, she spends more time in our habitat than anybody else. But I think that one may be brewing over at Commissioner Wyrick's seat.
We do have little brown bats in our backyard, and they come out every evening right about now, and I can sit out on my back deck and watch them. And between the bald-faced hornets and the little brown bats, I have this many mosquitoes in my backyard.
Well, that's very important that we have little brown bats. But is there any other species you would like to see? Okay.
Right.
Yes. Commissioner Dorian.
Just a question on, what is this, sorry, 4013, line 6. I'm just wondering how recent that information is that the purple martin is no longer nesting in Kenmore, just because I think that comes from an older draft, but so when we say recent, just kind of placing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this information was last updated in the last comp plan, but as I mentioned, I sent this out to Fish and Wildlife for their comments, and they didn't have any specific changes to it other than the addition of the little brown bat. So I'm going to assume that this is consistent with what their species are. Now, I do know, I don't know if it's this one or yeah, the next line, it just says about the Bald Eagle Protection Act. I know that the bald eagle was removed, which it says, and somewhere in a previous one, it said it was still listed, but that's been since changed. I think it's been well over a decade now that they've been removed.
But it's
from
still
the list.
protected.
What's that?
It's still protected.
Protected, yeah, but not like endangered, I guess was the
Right.
term I was looking for, endangered, so yeah. But to my knowledge, I mean, I think this is the most recent list of species, but they would definitely let us know.
Oh, Commissioner Olson.
To Commissioner Dorian's point, could we potentially change the
Yes, speak up.
Oh, apologies. To Commissioner Dorian's point, could we change the recent to previous? Just to, if it was changed in the last comp plan, I don't know how many years ago that was, frankly, but if it's anything like the stormwater element, I assume it's been a minute, and we could just, like, unless that's changed and purple martins are nesting in Kenmore again. It seems to me like we could just change that from recent information to previous.
Everyone okay with that? Great. Okay. Commissioner Beninsinski.
Yeah, As long as the topic has been brought up, do you happen to know what information or what source that was referring to? Again, allowing that it was probably already in the draft. And it's just a holdover from that,
Which,
about
sorry,
the Purple Martin no longer being here.
this one was from recent, so I haven't changed anything from the
Right.
previous version,
Yeah.
so.
Any idea about what that source of that was?
I'm gonna guess that it was probably the Fish and Wildlife
No,
Species Handbook. They have a book that, I don't know the specific one unless it's on the bottom here. Trying to think, they've sent me so many emails. I should know this.
And presumably, since WDFW looked at this and they thought that there were Purple Martins nesting here, they would have told you.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
they have yeah, I think it's Priority Habitats and Species Handbook. They make an update to it. I don't know if it's 5-10 years, but I know they frequently look, and then they obviously look at best available science and all that, so it's consistent or up to date.
This is, I have to close my eyes, I get dizzy.
Sorry, making you dizzy.
No, that's okay. I
There we go.
just, you know,
I'm there.
I'm just-
I had to look at the bottom. Now I'm there.
if you don't smile at some of this, you just cry. So are we ready to move on? Okay, so the way I see it, we are at the end of line 10 on page 15, correct? All right. All right, so we're on to page 17, Shoreline Master Program, and where that starts. And then we're going to cruise on through to page 19, line 20. Commissioner Dorian.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I really appreciated the inclusion of the Scott. I know we set you that challenge and challenge accepted. So thank you.
And shout out to Commissioner Wyckoff for changing instead of the SWAT, we changed it collectively as the Scott. So, yeah.
Okay. So on page 18, there's a lot of different colors. Am I looking at page 18 on your what page? So those are blue, not green.
Yeah, I think what happened here is, I add things and then Debbie looks at it and she makes a few adjustments. And so that's really what's happening here is, when I remove the comments off to the right side, I didn't change the colors back to just red, but know that these are all changes, but they're highlighted in blue, noting that these are changes from the last meeting based on the comments.
Right.
Yeah, so
Okay.
ignore the color of the text.
On here.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So they should be red, but again, we'll have a clean version for you at the hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, before the hearing, right?
Yes.
Well, that's okay. My printer could have been screwing up the ink, so
No, I see
I'm
different
just
colors
needed to
too.
ask. My wife complains about my printer often. So I need to stop that. That's not a good thing. All right, so there's no questions about any of this up to the goals and objectives, right? We're good? Okay, so now we're going to be on page 19, and we're going to start with goal number 1. And that goes through that goes quite a ways. That goes through line 7 on page 24.
Yeah, and then and just a note, preface, remember that at our last meeting, we spent pretty much the entirety of the meeting of the narrative portion, and we'd said that we would spend the time, if needed, to go over the goals and policies, as well as the subsequent code changes. So this is kind of where we left off of the last meeting.
Right, thank you. I noticed there's a greener on line 7, page 20. That is wildlife? The state that suggested?
That's the state, yeah.
Okay.
So that's Fish and Wildlife's comment or
Okay.
addition.
And also I noticed on page 21, likewise, lines 7 through 10 is green, or is it through 12? Is that right?
Same page.
No, page 21.
Oh, correct. Yeah, policies 1.36 through 1.38. Those are also additions by the state.
I like that overhead lighting. That should catch some people's attention. I think that was pointed out. Yes, Commissioner Olson.
I like the overhead lighting. I thought you guys did a really great job on all the updates. I really appreciate it, and all the work. And now that I've gotten halfway through the compliment sandwich, I am wondering about objective 1.2.1, line 15 on page 20. Require new developments which could generate substantial levels of noise or could expose people to substantial levels of noise from existing noise generators to submit an analysis. I guess my question here is could we expand that not necessarily just to new developments, but also to roadway work and the like? I know that there is significant, it's actually noted, I think, in here, right, where we reference 522 and the like, and I know that's a washed out roadway, but I'm thinking, I don't know, 68th, 61st, Juanita Way, Simons, they probably all have pretty major noise generation just due to the number of vehicles and the speed at which the vehicles are traveling. So potentially looking at noise impacts from the city's major roadways.
You say, you said just now state roadways, but you also referred to other major local roadways.
Yeah,
like
I was
Juanita
I was thinking more major local roadways. I mean, I don't know what input we have over, well, actually, I guess it's just any roadway really, we should be looking at the noise pollution as a result of it. And to me, it seems like we're requiring developments to go through this work, but if, I'm trying to think how I'm going to phrase this. As far as an analysis of potential impacts, I would imagine the state already has to go through some of those practices when they're negotiating with the city on a particular, I don't know, like for the BRT route, for instance, right? Because there would be some impact just from the number of cars and the speed at which the cars are traveling in terms of noise pollution onto Kenmore. But also to the city just evaluating what impacts changes in our roadway design, whether that's increasing speed limits or decreasing them, for instance, would be an example. But just looking at more, I guess, than just development impacts, but also like the way we build infrastructure and those impacts.
We could add, require new developments and roadway projects, et cetera. I think the thing to note, which I think Debbie commented here on the end here, this might be her addition, is determined through environmental review. So these are done on a case by case, or not case by case, project by project basis. They go through the environmental review process. So they're by default, they're gonna have the standard, SEPA checklist that has to go through those checks and balances as they're being developed. But I think at a minimum, your comment on saying not just new developments, but also, and roadway projects or something to that nature, that might satisfy.
And I'm using roadway projects because it's what I'm familiar with. I'm sure there's other examples of public infrastructure and capital improvements that might have similar impacts. And that might be covered by environmental review already. I don't know, I saw new developments and was like, I feel like there's other things besides just new developments. So
I think what you're looking for is sort of a word that expands on development, because if it's a new roadway project or any kind of park project or anything, they all have to go through SEPA review, and noise is one of the categories on the SEPA checklist. So I think it's just a way of trying to expand development, and we just need to come up with an appropriate word that kind of encapsulates. It's not just development, it could be project. It's like projects, but it's not just projects either. So I'm not sure what that word is, but I hear where you're trying to go on that.
Yeah, maybe instead of new developments, switch it out to development projects.
No.
So we good with those changes? Yes, yes, okay. And we've agreed on that. Wonderful. Okay, so where are we now? I think we're somewhere. Through to objective 2, which is on line 28 on page 24. Yes, Commissioner Olson.
I had one other thing for objective 1. This was for objective 1.4.
Just a page and line number, please.
Page 21 and line number 34. Wait, that's not right. I must have.
Just so you know why we do that is our experience in prior commission meetings over the last few years is that it's faster for the rest of us to find what you're talking. If you give us a page and a line number, some of us guess. And we're often wrong. So that's the only reason I've just learned that over a period of time.
Well, I read the page number off the iPad and the line number off my piece of paper, and we got the page number wrong. Page 22, line 34, apologies. And I was, the language I was looking at here, oh gosh. I must have written something down. Could you give me I must have written something down incorrectly. Could you give me a minute to try and figure out what I was thinking earlier?
That's fine. So, if there's no objection, we'll let you come back to that once you find yourself somewhere. Okay, so with that understood, is there anything else on objective 1?
Just a positive point. I'm seeing language about monitoring coming in through the objectives now, which is good to see. That was a piece of feedback that I had is that we wanted to see more of that, like monitoring and not regulation, that's the wrong word, but being able to take action on monitoring. I'm seeing a lot of that folded in. So.
All right. Oh, Commissioner Olson.
I found it and I was in the right spot, but thought I was in the wrong spot. Basically, line 34, page 22, require treatment measures where development results in discharges to surface or groundwaters. By results, would that include, I'm assuming that would include a redevelopment of a lot, and they have to meet current standards for discharges. They can't just say, oh, well, we're matching what was here before, so we don't need to do any additional improvement. I guess my thought is bringing things up to code. I'm assuming that would be the case, but just the way it says results in discharges, I'm not sure if I feel like I might be picking on that word a little too much. It's really more just,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I want to make sure that we're requiring infill development, new development to meet modern standards, not meet the baseline threshold of what's there today.
Commissioner Ryrick.
I think that is speaking to like a construction project where it would cause murky water runoff. And so they've got to put the hay filters out there or something to minimize or whatever, impede that impact, is the way I'm reading it.
That would make a lot more sense. I was reading it as the development itself.
Ms. Bent wants to say something. I can just tell. I've gotten used to this, our esteemed developer who has been here since
Oh,
the
stop,
development
please.
of the
Enough.
city.
That's enough. So any development where it triggers any kind of permit then would have to then comply with the new standards. So you don't get a pass just because you built something in 1968 and now you want to rebuild it in 2024, you now have to comply with the 2024 standards.
Perfect, thank you. I was pretty sure that was the case, but just
Oh, that's okay.
wanted to highlight it.
Yeah,
Okay, Commissioner Wyrick again.
I know there was a specific case that was being continually monitored up by Simons Road, I believe, that had some pretty serious runoff that was a major concern at a facility that wasn't being managed properly during some seriously heavy rainstorms. And so this was kind of where my mind went when we were discussing this topic. And then there was another issue over kind of by Twin Springs, feeding into one of the reservoirs over there where the similar situation, and they didn't have the hay and they didn't have the stuff to keep the silt in. And so everything downstream of that looked horrible and was seriously impacted. So I'm just reading that that's what this is talking about, is to make sure they're being as clean as possible.
All right, if there's no further comments on objective 1, we'll move to objective 2, which begins on, goal 2, excuse me. Goal 2 that starts on line 7, page 24, and goes through line 12 on page 25. Commissioner Dorian.
So 4D24, starting at line 15, I think this is a very good change that is proposed in the green, or an update, not a change, but it also feels like a big one. So I did want to note that and just draw other commissioners' attention to it. This adding into policy NE 2.1.3, create a prioritization list for areas that should be considered for transfer of development rights, conservation easements, or acquisition as a land use development tool into that existing policy. That feels stronger, and I like it that it's stronger. So just calling that out.
You like it the way it
Yes.
is? Oh, good.
I
I think it is
Yeah.
strong.
Yeah.
It's one of the, well, I should be quiet out of the chair. You know.
Well, you could try.
I could try. Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Dorian. I had highlighted that one too, as liked, so. Anyway, anything else on goal 2? Seeing none, we are going to move on to goal 3, which starts on line 19 on page 25. And continues. It continues to page 29 on line 30. Commissioner Banazinski.
This is on page 4026, line 10, policy NE 3.1.8. And this is, to me, this feels like a major, so I apologize for not noticing it before. I am surprised that I didn't. I have very mixed feelings about allowing public access to wetlands for recreational use. I understand that it has happened recently. When we renovated Huddy's Park, for example, we put public access through wetlands. But I think as a general rule, I have very mixed feelings about it, given how much wetland destruction our watershed has endured and how precious the few high functioning wetlands we have left is. So I want to say, I want to strike recreational use from that policy.
So there's Commissioner Banazinski wishes to strike the words recreational use and the comma after that. Is there a comment on that issue, Commissioner Olson?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the allow. To me, allow does not mean we have to always, right? It just means that we have the ability to use that recreationally, but potentially, right? That we have the ability to say this particular trail might work. Sorry.
I have a possible proposal for changing that recreational to something a little softer. So allow public access to wetlands for scientific, educational, and traditional cultural use, so that it's sort of in that recreational, but I see what you're saying is that in Tlaquettes Park, we have these bridges that go out there, and we have these narrative plaques or signage that was placed on there. And so in that case, it's more of an educational opportunity, or it could say scientific educational opportunities and something along that nature, so that you're taking out the recreation, because I agree with that. It's not like we're going to go out. We want to encourage people to boat through the wetlands, right? Which is not what we're trying to encourage, but that just a thought.
Would you consider something like passive recreation? I mean, we can come up with a better term. I think it's one of those
Yeah.
things where it's a balance. I think it's trying to create a balance of access to wetlands for these kinds of uses. Because sometimes the access, then if you're allowing people to access them, there is an education opportunity and maybe to kind of help more with that stewardship aspect. So I don't think you want to preclude public access because there are benefits of having people in the open space and, you know, being with wildlife and so forth. It needs to be done in a very careful, considered way.
Yes, I agree with everything you've said about the benefits of having people be able to be immersed in these ecosystems. I think this is a very complicated, nuanced discussion, which is why I'm sorry I didn't bring it up earlier. I think the reason I feel so queasy about it is because humans have done so much to assert ourselves into these spaces. We have so few high-functioning wetlands left that the thought of us continuing to feel like we can intrude upon them for even passive recreation use just makes me feel queasy. I don't have a better word for it than that. So I may just have to live with my mixed feelings if there's not consensus on the commission about that recreational use, but even passive recreational use, there are impacts to wetlands. Even putting a raised elevated boardwalk through a wetland has impacts on the wetland, the functionality of it, the ability for critters to access that habitat. You know, I regularly used to see deer at Twahatis before it was, you know, we put in all those things and I have not seen them since. They may come out, you know, when people aren't around, but it just has impacts that I think we don't often think about.
Okay, so if I may, to clarify this, I believe we have a motion and it's seconded that has been asked that recreational use be struck. So we can work on amendments from there. So I've got Commissioner Wyrick over here and. Okay.
Yeah, I'm suggesting maybe an alternative for that particular location of the word recreational. Following scientific, maybe fill in with educational and interpretive. That's a terminology that the state parks use for interactive activities within the wildlife areas and the forest. And furthermore, I would agree with limiting reasonable expected recreation use, but I also feel strongly that, just for an example, all of the people that come to the defense of St. Edward State Park and protecting it is because they are able to experience it. And if it were simply a fenced off area that they could not experience, they wouldn't even understand what it is that they want to protect. But because they are so able to immerse themselves in it and understand the value of it and value it themselves personally, gives them even more passion to protect it. It helps them understand what's there. I know personally, I'm one of those that feels very passionately about protecting St. Edward State Park because I enjoy its use and I respect its existence. But yeah, that's just a flip side of what you're talking about, another perspective.
Yeah, no, I do feel a tug toward the importance of allowing people access, just like Debbie brought up and you're bringing up. I'm glad that we have that ability here. I think we already have it in a lot of areas. We have it at St. Edward State Park. We have Swamp Creek Park. We have Twahatis Park. I think the idea for me of allowing like even more, into wetland number 3, for example, like the idea of building a boardwalk through there just makes me want to cry, because it would degrade that habitat for other critters who aren't humans. And also I think just to kind of create even more nuance, like it's much different to have people walking through a forest than it is to have them walking through a wetland. They're different ecosystems and there's different impact there. Wetlands are really sensitive places. So I don't know that you I don't know, that you could like learn to care more about a wetland if you could walk through it than if you could like be near it and look at it and observe it from like a fence. So just, yeah, another kind of nuanced point to throw in there.
Commissioner Vanderling.
Do appreciate your comments, and I absolutely agree. I think you have to have some sort of ability for the public to experience it. What that is, I think, is an open question, which we probably can't answer here. So when I looked at this, what I was thinking of would be to delete the first two words here, allow public, and say control access to. And if we can come up with a better term than recreational, I like your suggestion, interpretive, something along those lines.
Commissioner Olson.
I think my mind was going in a similar direction. Commissioner Vanderland, I was also kind of thinking about controlling access as opposed to just allowing public access. I think to me, it is very site dependent. And we have places where we allow public access for recreational use today. So I wouldn't want to necessarily strike that out, but I also agree that we should not be degrading untouched large swaths of wetland for this in the future. We can come up with alternatives and solutions around it despite some of the drawbacks to that. Like, for instance, I know having a bridge, or not a bridge, but a boardwalk through Swamp Creek would be great from a connectivity standpoint, which I am very passionate about. But I understand that that has some pretty significant environmental drawbacks. And so to me, I think controlling public access kind of walks that line a bit better, just because we're not saying we can't do this thing, but we need to explicitly and intentionally allow for that type of access in a place. Another place that I think would be kind of fall under recreational use would be Wallace Swamp Creek Park, the areas where we can walk around and just experience it, right? And those places generally aren't like the really thick portions of wetland. I mean, there are some of that, but not a ton. It's generally more just the floodplain.
Commissioner Vanderling. Or you did raise your hand.
Yes, yes, I did. I think here, as we are in so many other points along the line, dealing with a question of balance. And so for when I look at this, what's important to me when I read this, is there's two pieces to it. One is there's some idea that we're going to allow access of some kind, but the counter opposing is balance is that we want to be able to protect critical habitat species and hydraulic function. So I think I'm looking for some language that allows that balance to be expressed and also creates the obligation on the city to control and manage that. Whereas it's just, what I don't like about this is too open, and it doesn't really create that sense that we need to have some control over that access to ensure that we have the critical access, the protection of the access to the species.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the table, and which does not preclude a second motion. Unless you want to amend the first motion.
I don't, I believe that Tracy had a comment.
Oh, you guys could talk behind me.
Oh, I thought you had your hands up for that.
Yeah, I just wanted.
Commissioner Vanazinski.
Thank you. I just wanted to make very clear that I am not talking about rolling back the access that we already have. I'm not talking about like tearing out the boardwalk at Talhadis or not allowing people to be in Wallace Swamp Creek Park. I am just thinking about future possible development that people might want to put into wetlands. That's what I feel sensitive about, not the access we currently have.
Okay, so so the motion on the table is to strike the words recreational use and comma. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Chair, can you repeat the motion?
The motion is to strike the words recreational use and the comma on line 10, page 26.
Thank you.
Correct. Okay. So now now that I've restated the motion, I will again call for ayes and nays. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Well, I personally, since nobody else is going to talk, am going to move Commissioner Vanderlein's suggestion is to strike allow and public and put the word at the first word in the sentence as control. If there's a second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we do that. The control motion, I'll call it the control motion. Does you got that one?
I've
Madam
got that.
Clerk?
Thank you. Yes.
Good, I'm learning. So is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, questions called. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Olson, you may go ahead and speak.
All right. So right now it would be control access to wetlands for scientific and traditional cultural use where public access trails are carefully cited. Would we want to change? I guess what I'm wondering is, would we amend this to remove? I'm trying to figure out how we, like, I feel like it changes that piece of it, right? We're talking about public access for trails that are cited so that such that they do not have, or such that they protect critical habitat species and hydrologic continuity is maintained, right? So for saying control access, should we change? The problem is I don't know how to change it, but I just wanted to bring that up. Kind of, we're getting getting rid of public in one part and not another.
Can I might be wrong on this, but I think what you're struggling with here is that there are two concepts in this policy, and maybe they need to be split into two. And perhaps the first policy would be to allow public access to wetlands for scientific and traditional cultural use, period. And then the second new policy would be something like control future public access trails and ensure where allowed, they are carefully cited, critical and so forth. So I think it's the two concepts maybe. I'm just throwing that out there. I know there's a motion on the table. Don't want to make it confusing.
I think that, apologies, I didn't ask.
Yeah, speak. Do you want to say anything or not?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't look to you first.
Oh, no, you're fine. She responded to you.
Yeah, I think that's closer to what I think that's the struggle that I'm having, right? Is I want to allow access for scientific and recreational use, which splitting these up would do. And we have existing access for, I mean, I would say recreational use, but really it's just, you know, a given public use of some kind. And I just would want to basically ensure that in the future we're controlling, right? We change the language so that it's controlling access to ensure that these things are protected and that there's a higher bar, I guess, for public access. And potentially it isn't allowed in a place, right? It's controlled. We could preclude it if it is a large wetland area, for instance. So I'm in favor of splitting these up. I'll come up with some language and potentially make a motion.
I would propose, I would withdraw my motion, which I can do. And I propose that we already struck recreational use, that's gone. And we allow the staff to take that policy 0.8 and work it. And if you want to split it, that would be fine, and come back to us the next meeting with a proposal. Would everybody be happy with that? Would be okay with that? Happy? I don't know if you'd be happy. The question is, you're okay or
Too
not?
much to ask.
Okay, so I think we've taken care of that issue. Thank you, Todd and Debbie. Pardon? All right, check the roll. Okay, so do we have anything else on goal 3? Commissioner Dorian.
So another bit of green on 4D27. This one, I think just maybe needs a little bit of a reword, because I understand the intent of the goals. So there's policy NE 3.2.4, but tying it to 2025 seems a bit time boxed, given that this is only going to be voted in at the end of this year. So is there, I mean, that just seems very, very specific. I get the policy that we want to keep areas of river cool enough to support Chinook salmon migration and survival. I don't know enough about the rest of that sentence to comment too much, but the by 2025 thing just stood out to me as a bit of a difference from how we would normally talk about our policies. I think we would want and I'm not going to try and reword it now, but some sort of reword to make the point that we want to keep the rivers cool enough on an ongoing basis for Chinook salmon, and that we think that maybe how to do that is by increasing riparian cover and adding thermal refuge. I'm not technical enough to know what I'm saying there, but I think you get the point. I think that specifically stating that goal for 2025 is a bit limiting, given that this is only going into effect at the end of 2024.
My apologies. I'm not an expert in this whatsoever. So this was just a suggested policy by Fish and Wildlife. So if the commission would like to make this more tailored specifically to Kenmore's needs, I think we have the ability to do that.
Commissioner Vanderleen.
I agree that the last phrase there really sounds to me more like an implementation step than it does a policy. So I would propose that we strike the parenthetical expression and the by 2025. I don't think we're competent enough to be able to say that.
Sorry. getting a little jittery here at the end there. Okay, so Commissioner Olson.
I would propose we adjust Commissioner Vanderlin's changes slightly, where we keep the increased riparian cover. Add to thermal refugia. I don't know what that language means, but potentially keeping a, oh, you know, okay. Commissioner Banaszewski might know what that means. If you would,
Commissioner Banaszewski, do you know what it means?
I do. So thermal refugia, thermal has to do with the temperature of the water. Refugia is a place for juvenile salmon to take cover. So they're suggesting, WDFW is suggesting that because the whole of the Sammamish River gets, if for example, gets way too hot for salmon. So, and we have to work on cooling the whole thing, but as an interim tactic, we want to create these little spots of thermal refugia that might be cooler and stay cooler. So salmon have a place where they can take cover and not be in hot water that's too hot for them. So I agree that this does read a little bit as a mix between a policy and an implementation measure. I think maybe Commissioner Olson, if we just took out the metrics, so if we said increase riparian cover and add thermal refugia and took out the date, that maybe it would read more as a policy.
that's exactly what I was thinking.
What we're gonna do?
So that would be areas of river will be cool enough to support Chinook salmon migration and survival, parentheses, increase riparian cover and add thermal refugia, period.
Period. So we're gonna strike by 2025.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a motion to strike by 2025. Is there anyone that doesn't like that?
And 10%.
Yes.
It was to strike by 2025 and the at least 10%.
Okay, well, can we start with one and then go to the other?
Yes, sorry.
I'm just asking if that's okay with you. Okay, if there's no objections. We're agreed to strike by 2025. Now, Commissioner Olson, if you would like to further.
I propose a motion to strike by at least 10% and add 2 from line 25.
Okay, well, we've already struck by 2025. So you're saying you want to strike by at least 10% and add 2.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Vanderleen seconds. Discussion. Commissioner Banaszewski.
Can I amend the motion now that it's been made, or do I have to wait for that? Can I amend the motion, or do I have to wait? Okay, just for clarity, because I think we have to keep the word add in order for the sentence to make sense. So I think I support the motion, and then I further amend it to keep add instead of deleting add.
You're keeping what's the motion that the amendment, you're keeping what?
Yeah, retain the word add.
Yep. That was a mistake. I did not mean to include that. Because we want to add thermal refugia.
And add 2.
We just want to get rid of the 2 from the strike.
If we take out add, it's not going to make sense, but what we want to do is take out the metrics.
Yep.
We want to add thermal refugia, we just want to take out how many.
Yep.
Would the clerk help me here? And what do you have?
Well, I'm not sure that this has to be a motion, actually. I think it's a suggestion. I mean, it's a,
Well, if we don't do a motion now, we're going to end up doing a motion in a couple weeks.
okay.
So, because there's some.
So what I have is, Areas of river will be cool enough to support Chinook salmon migration and survival. Increase riparian cover and add to thermal refugia. Yeah, period.
That's,
I
that,
don't think,
go ahead.
Tracy, were you?
Yeah, that was the motion, and then I want to amend the motion to, I know we're getting lost.
Can I make a suggestion? Can you please just take back your motions
Okay,
and then let's start all over with a motion that you, with how this,
Proposed
with,
language.
with proposed language, because I think we're going to get balled up in these motions. And I know where you want to go, but now we have like confusing
Okay.
motions on the table.
is there, is the makers of the motion have any objection to withdraw them?
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, so they're withdrawn now with the permission of the commission. So let's take the recommendation of the staff, and if the staff has a version of this that they think would meet our needs, go ahead.
All I would be doing would be deleting the numbers, would be deleting 10%. I would be deleting the reference to 2 TWO and by 2025. So it would read, areas of river will be cool enough to support Chinook salmon migration and survival, and then in parens, increase riparian cover and add thermal refugia. Is that it? I'm seeing
Okay,
thumbs up. Okay, great.
So we're going to accept the staff's recommendation. Head nods, that's it. We're done. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It took us a little while to get there. Okay, so now, anything else on 3? Yes, go ahead. Commissioner Olson.
This one, and please correct me if I'm missing something, staff. Policy, sorry, page 29, lines 25 through 30, policies 3.3.14 and 0.15. They seemed a little out of place to me, and I was wondering if those would potentially go down with goals NE4. And then when I was reading through this, it looked like they might overlap with some of the policies in NE4. That was develop a citywide and regional connected network of open spaces, public trails, parks, and recreation facilities proximate to all residential neighborhoods, and then organize and site housing, commercial space, and public infrastructure and multifamily residential buildings to create usable and connected open spaces. So I agree with those policies. I want those to be implemented. They make sense to me from a natural spaces and environment element, but I just wasn't sure if that should go into.
I think
the next
you're
goal.
right. I think they're misplaced. I was struggling where they went, and I think you're correct. They should be moved to the next section.
Okay.
So yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
So that's just a structural thing.
It's just moving them. Yep.
Okay. But not changing them.
Not changing language, if that's the will of the commission.
That would,
Yeah.
yes, we're all agreed. Okay. Anything more on policy 3? Or goal 3? Okay, we're going to go to goal 4 then. We're almost done. So this is going to take us to the end of the goals. Okay, anything for goal 4?
And I think this was just getting at, we forgot, this might have been yours, Commissioner Dorian, or I'd have to look at the matrix, but I believe somebody mentioned that we did not have a connection of the climate action policy. So that's what this is it's adding that into this to bridge the two together. So that's really what it is. That's the purpose of all the new stuff.
Now we have a lot of encouraging words. Are we all happy with the encouragement? I just noticed that and we've talked about that a bit. Okay, is there any further discussion? No further discussion on that. So now we're going to go on implementation strategies, which is pretty short, and references. So that's to the end on page 32.
And you'll note the last one, I think this was also a comment as up in the narrative, we were talking about it, but we added an implementation about septic system. I think this might have been yours, Commissioner Vanderlaan, or about making sure we include that. That's the last bullet.
Okay. Any further discussion on implementation strategies? Yes, Commissioner Olson.
Pretty minor item, line 10, page 31. Air quality and noise analyses for major new developments, just changing major new developments to major development projects. Just consistent with what I was bringing up earlier as far as noise with like roadways and the like.
Okay, so what do you want to do?
I just want to change major new developments to major development projects. So strike new developments and
Oh, just
put in,
strike new?
yeah, strike new and then change developments to development and then projects as in plural. So that way it's kind of a wider category than just.
So is a single home a development versus a project? Would you consider, would the city consider building a single home be a project?
That's a good question.
I mean, you can have a huge single home of 6,000 square feet.
I mean, I don't know what the definition is of developments, if it's even in our code, but to me, that's just a single home development. Major development would be something like across the street, you know, where you've got multiple units, multi-story. But that's Planner Hall's interpretation. I don't know if that, again, if that's defined. Yeah. But I wouldn't say a development is a house, a single unit.
Okay, so.
Pretty broad. Oh.
Okay, so good. I just, because sometimes it's words.
I mean, if it covers it, then I guess we're good. Yeah.
I would just strike, I would suggest we strike major and along the lines of what you're thinking.
Yeah, I think I'm also kind of thinking new for places where we're retrofitting or updating just for developments. Oh, well, no, that doesn't work because it's got to be in construction. Oh, sorry.
What do you want to do? What are you suggesting? Or are we going back to the table?
I was originally suggesting saying major development projects, but I'm leaning more towards striking major and just saying new developments. I guess my question would be for Debbie, with that definition of developments, does that, to be consistent with my previous statements about noise, pollution with other capital improvement projects and the like, would it include roadway work or a maintenance facility or something along those lines? Or anything else I can't think of at the
If we
moment.
strike the word major, it would include everything. That motion, strike, you don't want to do that, strike major. Or somebody else can. Just striking, just major. Yeah, go ahead.
This is a question of clarification. When this was, well, this is something that has continued from the previous iteration, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So you might not have access to what the writer of that said, but how does that read to you as staff, and how do you think that the staff and the city would interpret that right now?
Well, if Debbie says that development is a broad one, then I would rescind what I said earlier about the one. If it's a broad term, then I'd say air quality and noise analyses for major new developments would include any type of development. Now, whether it's a house or this type of one across the street, the other way to say is you could say development instead of with the S, which then takes the term in the, I believe it's development, right? Is the term that's in the Kenmore Municipal Code. So then it's not major developments or developments, it's just development, any type of development that's under that category, which is defined.
Development is a fairly broad term, and you would not typically do a noise and an air quality analysis for a single family home. It's where, I guess, where more SEPA is triggered. So I think that's where it would come in, where you would be doing that kind of thing, is if a SEPA analysis is triggered. So I have to change the term. My brain is switching off. Or has switched off.
It's almost 10.
Yeah.
I think the reason I'm asking the question is because I interpret these, what this is saying here, new programs, rules, or regulations would need to address. I have always read that as like the staff's recommendation about what everything that comes before, what that would result in, and what kind of like work that might add to staff. Is that fair? A fair read of that section? Because I don't read it as we're making policy recommendations there.
No, this is not a policy.
No.
This is
Yeah.
not a policy recommendation.
Yeah.
What it's saying is, I guess, is to address those policies.
Exactly, right.
You would need to do this kind of analysis for new development, is what it means.
Yeah, and so from your perspective, given all the policy work we've done before, is line 10, that's additional, that's work that staff would have to do, and staff would understand what that means?
You understand what that is, what
Okay.
Debbie's saying is an environmental review process that's dictated by the state. So it's not necessarily the city's process, it's the state's process that we have to assess,
Yeah,
right? So anytime a project comes in, this isn't necessarily Debbie and my work, but Development Service, our kind of sister department that we work with. They're the ones that are going to take the development projects in and then assess based on an environmental review process, and air quality, noise, traffic, all those things are assessed. So this is just saying that for new programs, rules, regulations would need to address all of these different things, and it's just saying air quality and noise is one of them. We can add more things to it if we want, but I think the key is that there is a process in place that is the city staff utilizes to assess these impacts or change, things like that.
yeah, so I understand I think I understand what Commissioner Wilson is getting at, and I also wonder if We've already addressed that by talking
That's what
about it
I'm
in the
thinking, yeah.
policies earlier.
You could just say, you could strike out major new developments and you could say air quality and noise analysis as not triggered or as required
by,
through an environmental review.
as required by environmental review.
I'm okay with that. Anybody else okay with that?
I'm
Are
okay
you
with that.
okay with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We accept
Still working.
the staff edit. Is there anything else through page 32? Yes, Commissioner Dorian.
Just a couple of things here, just to walk it back to the policies, etc. Well, first of all, the thing that drew my attention to it was line 21 on 4D31. As that's a review of existing policies and as this comes from a previous draft, do we still need increased surface water management requirements? Or is it now more that we're looking at the sufficiency of surface, like were they increased in the past as part of this previous draft? I guess that's where my mind is going. Like if in the past we said they needed to be increased, were they, or do they still need to be increased? And then just with that in mind, I think there are a few things like the policies have now added light pollution. So we might need to add light pollution into like similar sort of idea. So there might just be a bit more crosswalk that we need to do with the implementation strategies.
So we'll go back and review and take a look at any new policies that have been added and see if it needs to have a similar implementation measure.
Because there's two sections in that strategy. One's for new and the other's to review the old. So what I just heard the staff said is that they're going to look it over and see what needs to be included. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
Yeah, I see heads nodding again. That's good. Up and down. That's great. Okay. Any other comments on this piece of work? Okay, so I would like to bring your attention to this novel piece that they have done with the commission questions, and I would hope that you have looked it over for your particular issue, and if it's not addressed as you wanted, this is the time. Okay, hearing none, then what do you want us to do with the terms? There's nothing, that's just reference, right?
So I'll just provide very brief comments on that. So because we are going through the natural environment element, and because the critical area code is relatable and the terms and definitions are, there may be terms and definitions that needed to be updated as part of the changes to the natural environment element. I've made some and I want to preface minor changes to these code sections. And specifically with regards to the critical area code. So as you know, the city is required to update the critical area and the shoreline master program every 8 years. And the last update was completed in 2019 prior to myself. And that was approved by the state at that time for its best available science. We're not required to update the critical area code to the full update until the 26-27 timeframe. That is when we'll begin starting on that is 2026 for an adoption of 2027. So what I've done is gone through and made some adjustments and necessary changes that are minor in nature. And so that's what's included in your packet now. It's not a full rewrite. It's not a wholesale like scrub. It's just, these are things that Debbie and I felt we needed to address now and kind of leave it at that. So.
Okay, so what's our role in these? Do we have to review them as a
They're-
planning commission?
Well, they're included if you have any, I guess, objection to any of these. The quick answer is no, you don't have to, but I've included them because they're related to, again, to the natural environment element. So I wanted you to be aware of it because we are required by the state to make any changes to development regulations and the comp plan update as we go along. They will be included though for your recommendation because they need to be adopted by the city council. So you would have to essentially make your recommendation, we approve of these. So that's why I'm giving to you for consideration, thought, if you have any suggested changes, thoughts. So, yeah.
I'm sorry to be such a deadhead about this,
No,
but
no,
so
it's
I
quite
gotta
all right.
ask another question.
Yeah.
Does this have to go to public hearing?
I would include it as part of the record, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
because it's part of this record for, again, associated to the natural environment element, these two sections. So
So-
yeah, you would be enveloping it together.
Okay, since this is Kenmore code, then they would adopt this by ordinance.
Correct, a separate ordinance
That's-
aside
that's right.
from the overall ordinance of the
Well,
comp plan, is that
Of the,
correct?
well,
Debbie?
you're right. Would you want them to do this sooner than December?
No, no,
No,
Oh,
no, no, no.
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 You've done this before where you've had comprehensive plan policies and implementing regulations. You've done that before. And this is just another example.
Oh, good. Okay, so can we, I'm gonna jump out here. You guys just beat me over the head if you don't like it. Is it possible for us to do this next meeting?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So I can give you a clean version of the natural environment element with the changes that you've suggested, which I think we've done before. And then we can go over these terms if you have any suggested changes or deletions or anything, concerns with those. But again, these should be relatively minor, but we can certainly do that.
I'll, if there's a motion, extend the meeting for 10 minutes.
So moved. I moved to extend the
Been moved
meeting
and
for 10 minutes.
seconded to extend the meeting 10 minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The meeting's
Aye.
extended by 10 minutes, Madam Clerk. So we can do this and finish this off next meeting because there's a lot of red
Yeah.
here and we're pretty tired.
Yep, understood, yeah.
We've done, and I know you all want to go home and we probably do too. Is that acceptable for next meeting agenda? Boy, there's a lot of smiles on that one.
Chair, I want to, oh, sorry. I just want to mention that the next meeting falls on the 4th of July week on July 2nd, and I want to make sure we have a quorum.
Okay. So let's pull out our calendars, folks. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I should have figured that one out. Okay, so what do we don't want to do it on the 4th of July weekend, correct?
Wednesday this year, isn't it?
It's on Thursday.
It's on Thursday, so this is the Tuesday prior.
I'll be here.
You're good for Tuesday?
I won't be here.
You
I'll be,
won't be
yeah,
here?
out of country.
You're going to do
Yeah.
fireworks somewhere. Here or not? You're here. Here. Would you Would your feelings be incredibly hurt if we go ahead and have a July 2nd meeting
No, you go ahead.
without?
Yeah.
Yeah, he says that's fine. Okay, we will, since the majority of us, the vast majority of us will be here on the 2nd, but the next I have to ask if our staff are okay with that. Or should we move it to the next week, or what do you want us to do?
It's up to you. I mean, we're prepared to come when we were prepared to come and talk about this remaining topic, bring back the natural environment, and also maybe the updated draft of the downtown element and
Okay, so how about,
community design.
Still, it's community design. We officially removed the character part, so it's back to the community design and downtown element. So yeah, just as Debbie mentioned, we'll go over the terms and definitions. We're comfortable with the revised draft of the natural environment. And then,
yeah, we will, you'll find that now that this is why we hash it out now, so we,
and then we'll spend the remainder of the time with the downtown community character element, which has been reworked with all those changes that you from way back, several meetings. The meeting after that, we're inviting our mental housing consultants to come back. And so I want to get through at least, you know, some of these older versions and hopefully this stuff so that we can move on to spend a lot of remaining time hopefully with middle. That's going to take a lot of time. So
if you think we spent a lot of time on that, on natural tonight, that's good. Now, so that's July 16th.
correct.
Okay.
And of course, Richard will come back again for his stuff.
On July 2nd.
That would be late, a little later, probably.
Oh, later.
August.
Yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause-
after the middle housing. So
Okay,
that's
so-
2 meetings of downtown community.
And leftovers, right? And so you're okay with July 2nd?
100%.
Okay, so we're going to remain on schedule. Madam Clerk, thank you for bringing that up to us. And we don't have any joint meetings with that other body that gives us the docket.
Oh, not yet. You've got to go through a public hearing on some stuff. One thing just to mention is on July 15th, the Urban Land Institute, the final report will be presented to the city council. So if anybody,
Oh, the final report on middle housing?
no, the final report, the Urban Land Institute, if you remember, we've talked about this
On
previously.
downtown.
On downtown.
Right,
They,
okay.
the final report will be presented to council on July 15th.
And that means we're gonna get it on the 16th? I mean, the
It'll be-
written,
It'll be distributed to staff at the end of June.
Oh.
So as soon as we get it, it'll be public and you can be able to review it at your leisure.
and I bet you won't even make us check it out of the public library either.
That's right.
I will send out a reminder about that to council because we may have a potential quorum for that night. So just know that'll come.
Right. Okay, so is there anything for the good of the order? Well, you only have a minute or two, guys. Go ahead. Just give me a hard time.
I am always appreciative of your work, but Todd and Debbie, I felt so seen in this with your revisions with the natural element. I felt like you really heard all of us. And I felt like I could see all of our suggestions incorporated in mine. And I love that you reached out to WDFW and incorporated those. I just felt it was really a wonderful example of collaborative work. And I felt it so strongly that I wanted to shower you with praise. Yeah, so thank you so much.
I would like to do the same, including to say that with all your work and all the effort that we did tonight, I feel very confident that the council is going to get a very good product as guaranteed by a few of us when we went to confirmation again. So, but I think it's important to the whole commission that we give the council a good product that they they can use. So and we can't do it without you guys. So even you, Miss Shannon, our dearest clerk who wants to go home. So hearing no further comments from anybody, including those at the end of our dais, each end. It is now 10:08 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned.